We're going to go ahead and get started. There hopefully will be some folks join us. Obviously, with the all of the information about the weather that's coming in and some of the hyperbole that has hit the media about how dire the situation is, obviously suppressed some of our numbers. But I'll tell you an experience I had as a young man. I was recruited to work on the campaign of then candidate Orrin Hatch, who later became a United States Senator, and I was helping him with his campaign. And we went to a campaign event, and there were 4 people in the room. And we had traveled quite a distance to get there, and we expected to have hundreds, and there were 4 people, 2 of whom were people that didn't like him. And so we had a tough crowd to deal with, right? And as we're talking, and he made his presentation, there was one guy sitting there that was enthralled by it. And after it was done, he came up and said, I want to volunteer for your campaign. And we said, oh, that's great, thank you. He said, no. He said, I want to volunteer full time. He said, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to come to work for you full time. And he did. It was really the craziest thing. And he became this evangelical person for Senator Hatch, for then candidate Hatch. But as we left that meeting and we're driving down the street, this was in a town called American Fork, Utah, there was on both sides of the street slam-packed cars parked up and down. And Orrin said to me, what's this? And I said, I have no idea. And he said, well, let's go in and see, because it was a big event with a lot of people. It turned out it was a wedding reception. And so Orrin Hatch went in and worked the crowd, both the groom and the bride's side of the family, shaking hands, got pictures taken. And then the bride's mother found out that he was a candidate. It was very upset with him that he had crashed the wedding party. After he won, the bride's mother contacted and said, could I get his signature? Could he sign some of these pictures? So things work out in the end as we go forward here. But welcome, obviously, to this show, to the fight that we continue to engage with protecting kratom, its legal access, and consumers being able to benefit from kratom despite the efforts by the US FDA to do everything they can in order to stop consumer access to kratom, and from each one of you selling kratom. It's their cause, and they're going to continue to do it. The latest incident that now has occurred is that the FDA, after having failed twice in getting the kratom scheduled under the Controlled Substances Act, twice making their best case, twice having it evaluated by the Drug Enforcement Administration, by HHS, and by independent scientists, twice having been found to be inadequate, and even by the Assistant Secretary for Health, Dr. Joie, who was asked to evaluate the recommendation made by scheduling, and he came back with his evaluation rescinding the application for scheduling, saying it was disappointingly poor evidence and data that was used. Despite all of that, then the FDA went around the United States system, ignored the Controlled Substances Act, and now they're shopping their anti-kratom message at the international level. They've actually been at it for a while. They've been disseminating this information internationally. They did so at the UN Commission on Narcotic Drugs meeting in Geneva in 2018. They started the conversation with Singapore and the Philippines. The Philippines did a study, couldn't find anything in terms of abuse by their population, but they published a report all repeating what the FDA was saying about kratom. And you can imagine that's just a litany of this negative stuff. Singapore just did it because the FDA wanted them to. They don't have a significant problem in Singapore with kratom in any way, shape, or form. But it started the narrative, and it was put on a surveillance status with the UN Commission on Narcotic Drugs. And where we are today is that on October the 11th, the World Health Organization Expert Committee on Drug Dependence will conduct an evaluation of kratom. And we're going to talk a little bit today about what that problem is. But before we do that, I want to test your deep knowledge about American history. Now, many of you in this room will not know what that date is or what that picture represents. Some might. Okay, anybody know? What is it?
It's Kent State, right?
That's the Kent State massacre that occurred on May 4th, 1970. The first, and this was an anti-war, anti-Vietnam War demonstration that took place by students at Kent State University. And the National Guard was called out in order to contain this riot. They were poorly trained National Guard soldiers that were there, and and things got out of control, and it ended up that there were 4 students that were shot and killed, 9 students who were injured by the gunfire. The first media report that came out, the first one, was that 4 National Guard soldiers had been shot and killed, not the students. That was the first media report. And that led to May 8th, what's famously known as the New York City Hard Hat Riot. 100,000 construction workers rallied, and the union leaders described what happened next as being out of control, because they marched through the streets of New York City going after kids, college kids, that were demonstrating against the Vietnam War, and they ended up with a bloody clash in the streets of New York City. Now, that was tragic, right? Why it happened, and we look back on history, but the significant thing is that everything that happened on May 8th was based on what supposedly happened on May 4th at Kent State University, but didn't. These construction workers honestly believed that they were protesting against the fact that National Guard soldiers had been shot and killed. Not one. Rather, it was the 4 students that were killed, 9 students that were injured. Later on a show on Dick Cavett, now I'm really dating myself, Dick Cavett was one of the most popular talk show commentators in TV at the time. He had, 3 months later, had one of the leaders of the union movement and a construction union boss from New York City on his show, and he was saying, how do you justify what you were doing? And 4 months, or 3.5 months, almost 4 months after everything that happened, the construction worker said, because they killed 4 National Guard soldiers. And Dick Cavett was stunned. And he said, whoa, wait a minute, wait. Didn't you know that that never happened? And the leader of this construction movement said, what? Of course it happened. I saw it on the news. He saw it the day it happened, the false news report, that in fact 4 National Guard soldiers had been killed and not one had. And that's what precipitated all this violence. So think about the impact of false information, right? How it gets transmitted and conveyed and circulated, and it becomes repetitive and over and over again, and suddenly we believe it. Suddenly it's the truth. And I can tell you that the people that represent Singapore at the UN Commission on Narcotic Drugs heard the FDA say it. The FDA is a highly credible organization, more credible, frankly, on the international stage than they are here in the United States of America, because we've seen what the FDA does. They're telling them that kratom is bad, it's killing people, and that's what everybody believes there. The current threat, this is the document that was submitted to the UN Commission on Narcotic Drugs through the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime. This is the staff doing a report, and they were talking about the current NPS threats, and it is the predicate for what the WHO is doing right now. New psychoactive substances. Kratom is not new. It's been around for centuries. It has been used safely for centuries. There's no justification for calling it new. Now, it is also not a psychoactive substance in the traditional scientific definition of it, but they had to shoehorn it in because the way to get these kinds of substances on the surveillance reports is to call it something it's not. Just like Scott Gottlieb stood in front of the American people on national television and said, kratom is an opioid. It's not. It did not matter that it wasn't true. He said it. And then when he was challenged by scientists, he said, well, it does have opioid effects. Okay, what does that mean? If you take it in its classic definition, what else has the effects, the same effects or similar effects that opioids have? Cup of coffee. Caffeine is a drug. It is one of the most prevalent drugs in the world. It is a drug and it has psychoactive properties which have similar effects as opioids. But Scott Gottlieb had in his view and in his scope kratom. And he couldn't justify what it actually is and called it something else that it is not. So here's what we see in the early warning advisory of toxicology highlights. They say the incidence of kratom identification in polydrug use cases are increasingly reported in a number of countries. True statement. We're seeing an increased incident of kratom being involved in polydrug use because people are using kratom in order to get off of dangerous opioid products. That was documented in the Johns Hopkins research that documented that of a survey of kratom users, consumers who were using kratom in order to wean off of opioids, that 87% of those people reported a reduction in the withdrawal symptoms. A good thing. A great thing. Nora Volkow, the director of the National Institute on Drug Abuse, testified before Congress and said this is why she wanted to keep kratom legal. This is why she wants it accessible. This is why she wants to be studied more, because people are successfully weaning off of the most pervasive, except for COVID, the most pervasive public health crisis we have in America today, which is drug overdoses, where there was a huge spike in overdose deaths in the last year that was reported by the government, and that's what Nora Volkow and the National Institute on Drug Abuse want to stop, and the FDA wants to demonize. And here we see the report. There's an increase in the number of polydrug cases that involve kratom. So what? Is it a good or a bad thing? They don't qualify what it is or isn't. They just say, they assume because the FDA said it, that it's therefore bad. We all remember what when the FDA pointed to the fact that there was an increasing number of cases involving kratom with the poison control centers. Not that there was a significant number. There was an increase in the number, and statistically the increase went from about 40 a year up to 250 a year, a dramatic statistical increase. And why? Because first the FDA started to point at kratom and say kratom's bad, and so mom sitting there says, oh, I better call the poison control center because I think that my son, 24-year-old son, is using kratom, and calls and said, is this a bad thing? That's why you see that incident. There was no qualitative evaluation done on the data, just the number of incidents reported, and that's what happened here. They saw an increase, a significant increase from 1 to 2, from 10 to 20, that kind of thing, which is not statistically significant in any way, and yet they try to make it into that way. Here they specifically look at the number of deaths that were reported to be caused by kratom in the UN document. In the deaths where causality could be assessed, kratom, as metrogene or 7-hydroxymetrogene, was determined to be non-contributory, low, or of medium contribution to death in all of the fatalities. That's the truth, and that's what was reported by the staff. There were no cases in which kratom was deemed to have caused or significantly contributed to the death. None. This was due to the circumstances and or presence of other drugs of potentially greater toxicological significance, such as opiates or opioids, and then they list those drugs. Now think about this. They put kratom on the surveillance document, and then they acknowledge, based on the research and the data, there's no significant problem with respect to deaths that are associated with kratom. So why is the WHO today doing a pre-review of kratom, leading to a critical review, which will put it into the process for kratom to be banned internationally? A high proportion of reported NPS fatalities in 2019 involved kratom, the colloquial name for the plant Mitragyna speciosa, which has some opioid and stimulant properties, containing pharmacologically active alkaloids, especially metrogene and 7-hydroxymetrogene. 47 instances were reported in the toxicology portal between 17 and 19 in the United States and Thailand, with one report in 17 increasing to 16 in 18 and 30 reports in 19. Now think about what they're using as data. They're using Thailand as an example, where Thailand just completely decriminalized kratom. It's gone from any of the statutes that relate to kratom being a criminal act. They just released 1,000 prisoners. They just wiped free and expunged the records of 8,000 convictions because of kratom. Why? Because they recognize from a drug reform standpoint that it makes no sense to criminalize anyone who possesses or uses kratom, because they see that there are health benefits. So Thailand, now this was done before Thailand took its steps, and so think about the position that we're going to be able to take with the WHO, that even when Thailand evaluated using the data that they were presented to put it on to their agenda, Thailand's rescinded it already. And I've been speaking with the Thailand government officials and with a number of scientists over the last week, and they're prepared to take this case directly to the World Health Organization. But look at what they're saying. 47 instances were reported in the toxicology portal between 17 and 19. When I called and asked what they're talking about, they said that they were relying upon data from the Centers for Disease Control and the FDA. Right? Now, the FDA, when asked by a reporter in the last 2 weeks whether they were the ones who instigated the World Health Organization review, they said no, not us. Innocent. Anybody that believes that looks to buy some land in Nevada for a fishing boat, because this makes no sense, what they're saying. So today we have the World Health Organization and the FDA hand in hand, in order to starting this process. Now, here's what happens, and this shows you how disingenuous the FDA is. This is the announcement that was given by the Department of Health and Human Services announcing that there was an international scheduling procedure. So under the Controlled Substances Act in the United States, when a notice is given by the World Health Organization to the United States through the Department of State, they get this notice. Now, this notice was actually published on July 23rd, okay, announcing a comment period that includes kratom as one of the substances that are going to be evaluated in a pre-review status by the World Health Organization expert committee. So there it is. The comment period was open. Now, this is the announcement reopening the comment period. And let me tell you a little background on this. On June 10th, they received the notice. July 23rd, they published it. 40-some days, the FDA sat on it. Then they open up a comment period. Well, the comment period is designed to do a couple of things. One, it traditionally is 30 to 90 days. It gives you a chance, the American people, to weigh in on a significant public policy issue. This is obviously significant. The FDA said, we're going to give you 11 business days to respond. 11, right? So we sued them. The American Kratom Association took on the beast, and we sued the FDA. And when the hearing was held, the judge said to the FDA, well, tell me exactly what you did. Well, we received the notice from the World Health Organization through the Department of State on June 10th. We published the notice on July 23rd. Why did you wait? No response. They said, just process. Okay, you gave them 11 days, 17 days overall, 11 business days to respond. How do you justify that? Well, the FDA said, we were under the impression that we had to submit our comments on August the 10th. They gave an August the 9th deadline. And so the judge said, well, why, if that's true, how could you possibly have evaluated their comments between the 9th and the 10th if you had to submit them on the 10th? So instead of answering that question, they said, oh, we just learned that we have until August the 27th. And the judge says, well, okay, then what are you going to do about that? And they said, well, nothing. And the judge said, well, maybe you ought to think about that. And so the assistant U.S. attorney that was arguing on behalf of the FDA waved the white flag and said, okay, we'll work a deal here. They reopened the comment period. We had at that point, if I recall correctly, somewhere in the neighborhood of 9,000 comments. Mark, am I right? And we got up but by the deadline of the 24th, we were at 50-some thousand. We're now at 63 or 4,000 comments. Now, we found out, subsequent to all of this, that the World Health Organization actually has a deadline for submission of materials to them of September the 24th. And so they closed it off. Now, here's the other thing that the FDA acknowledged to the judge. She said, they said, we are not required to do anything with the comments other than to receive them and to consider them. That's it. We don't have to pass them on to the WHO. We don't have to do anything other than internally consider them. We don't have to characterize what the comments say. We don't have to distill down into any kind of a report or an evaluation of what those comments are and what the majority of them say or don't say. Don't have to do that. We just do it for because the law requires it, an internal evaluation. And I can tell you that didn't sit well with the arbiter in this case. So, but that's where we are. We're at this point where the FDA acting disingenuously. So where we are today, we have a process that starts on, and actually started here on the request for the pre-review was made sometime in early 2021. We have asked and gotten conflicting information about who made the request. There are any number of groups, people, countries that could have done it. The member state could have done it. It could have been from that surveillance document that I showed you earlier, likely that. But that, of course, was influenced heavily by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. They opened up the pre-review process in July of 2021. That's when they actually issued a call for the Expert Committee on Drug Dependence to consider kratom. The peer review is in October 11th of 2021. It's going to be a remote-only meeting. Now, we originally, when we got the notice, started planning to send a delegation of scientists and policymakers to Geneva to make a presentation. We liked that format. We wanted them to have the opportunity to interact with these members of the expert committee. Unfortunately, because of COVID, that's all been shut down, and everything will be done remotely, which limits our ability to have those one-on-one interactions between some of the world's leading scientists on kratom and these individuals who have been designated by the World Health Organization, who themselves are scientists, and so we like that environment to be able to have that interaction. So now we're limited to the actual presentation. There's 2 hours allotted for public testimony on October the 11th. We have to apply to actually get a 5-minute speaking slot. And of course, the scientists are saying, how can we convey anything in a 5-minute period? And they're also limited to 500 words in a written document that's submitted. None of that makes any sense, all stacked against us, right? So we've retained some experts that have worked in this process over the last decade, and we've developed a communication channel that will assure that we get all of the relevant science in the hands of the expert committee for them to make a review. Now, frankly, there is a dispute among our team because we've got people from Thailand, from Malaysia, from the Philippines, and from the EU, and from Indonesia, and there's a question about whether the expert committee is going to go to a critical review or they'll just stop it right here at the pre-review. Theoretically, the pre-review process means that they'll decide whether there's enough evidence to go forward. And we know, based on the surveillance report, the staff report that was provided to them, that most of their evidence is bogus, and we know that there's no scientific justification to continue other than the US FDA wants them to do so. That's it. So we're hopeful that there will be a pre-review termination that will occur in October. The indications are that politically, the expert committee probably will not like to do that. They'll probably want to be able to go to an expert panel review, a critical review, which will take a year. So we could fight this battle for 12 months. During that time, the process is the United Nations will hire probably 10 experts. So they put out a request for proposals. They'll hire 10 people that will be the primary researchers to advise the expert committee on drug dependence. We don't know who those people would be, so we're going to have to watch that process carefully and hopefully encourage some of the leading researchers in this field to apply for those positions. Those are paid positions by the UN in their pursuit of trying to find out the truth about kratom. But the more important thing for us is that what they evaluate. We have completed, through Jack Henningfield, the restatement and the update of the 8-factor analysis. That document is critically important because it is a compilation of all the published research that has been available on kratom. We did one in 2016, and that was the predicate for the Drug Enforcement Administration, along with the 23,232 comments that were submitted, to say, oh, enough, we're not doing this. And they rescinded the recommendation and then said to the FDA, we want the full 8-factor. The FDA submitted their full 8-factor, and that's the one that was evaluated by Dr. Joie and found to be completely evidentiary, from an evidence standpoint, being lacking. It didn't meet the standard. And it was Dr. Joie who said that if you do this, if you ban it, then you put at risk millions of Americans who will be forced off of using this safe product into a very unsafe environment with opioids that have a very specific addiction liability and a safety protocol that's off the charts. So it made no sense. So this 8-factor analysis, which obviously supersedes the one by the FDA, which was found to be lacking, that was in 2018, now has 100 plus new scientific studies that have been peer-reviewed and published around the world that document the safety of kratom and its potential benefits. And so if these expert review panel members are looking at the science and they're not looking at politics, then we'll be able to stop this at the expert review panel. And the good news about that, and the one virtue of going to a full critical review, is that if at the end of that process the expert committee determines that there is no action to be taken, that concludes anything that the UN Commission on Narcotic Drugs can do. Now, if they did recommend scheduling, we would have about a 4 or 5 month window to try to influence that decision. That's a much tougher environment to operate in. You have a lot of international people working on that, so we obviously don't want to get to that level. But we're preparing for it. The International Drug Policy Consortium, which is made up of over 100 international groups, has joined with us, and they're helping us with this effort. We have the Drug Policy Alliance here in the United States that is working closely with us in order to prepare statements and to weigh in on this issue. They're particularly concerned about the criminalization aspects of this. So, by the way, this shows you how kratom breaches across all of the philosophical boundaries, because you look at Senator Booker, for example, one of the most liberal members of the United States Senate, who doesn't want to see kratom be criminalized. He articulated that in 2016. He remains resolute in that today, and we're, of course, going to continue to work with him to do it. So here, back to this process, we obviously have until March 2023 when the Commission on Narcotic Drugs at the UN will make their final decision in terms of scheduling. And just one aside to this, if they do that, if it made it to the end of that process, and if the UN Commission on Narcotic Drugs were to recommend scheduling and place it into the treaty, the United States is obligated as a member state to proceed with scheduling of kratom here in the United States. And it would be a tough sell for us to defeat it at that point. So we obviously don't want to get it to that point as we go forward. The UN Commission on Narcotic Drugs accepts virtually every single recommendation made by the Expert Committee on Drug Dependence. In the 42nd ECD meeting, they accepted all of the recommendations from the WHO on psychoactive substances that were recommended to them. So that's how tough it is when it gets to that level, and why we got to fight against it in getting it done. In order to fight this battle, and this just gives you're business people, you understand that there's a bottom line. You know what it takes to acquire the raw material, you know what it takes to process it, you know what your marketing requires, and you know what your end product is, and you want to be able to collect money. Hopefully you're a for-profit group. At the end of the day, you make money on it, right? This is what it's going to take in order to fight this battle with the UN Commission on Narcotic Drugs and the WHO Drug Dependence Group. The science presentation, the recruitment of key opinion leaders in the science community, we budgeted about $140,000. This involves getting these scientists engaged in this, working with their colleagues, circulating information, and in some cases retaining them in order to get the legal process done, or get the scientific process done. The legal team costs are about $175,000. That includes the litigation against the FDA with respect to the comments, but that's only the beginning. We are filing in the next 10 days a citizens petition with the FDA that will demand that they disclose all of the safety data that they have on kratom. We know that about 4 years ago, the FDA approved a human clinical trial for a study of kratom to look at the potential drug interactions with specific drugs. In order to approve that trial, the FDA had to have determined it was safe for a human to ingest kratom. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. They have never disclosed that. We now know about the human clinical trial because it just concluded 2 days ago in Washington University. At least it was scheduled to. We know that required that safety study in order to document it. Now, we all know that if you were a vendor and you applied to the FDA Office of Dietary Supplements for a new dietary ingredient notification, they will tell you that your safety data didn't work, right? They do that routinely. Now, how in the hell can they approve a human clinical trial that they know has a safe level of use by humans and still make that claim? It's because of politics. It's not because of science, right? We also know that from a scientific perspective, that they just announced that they were going to do a human abuse potential study and a dose finding study that has been issued for a request for proposals. Now, the interesting sidebar to that is that typically it would be a university-based research organization that would bid on and actually do that study. The Johns Hopkins University people called the FDA and said, wait a minute, we have a significant problem here. We will not do a study that you don't allow us to publish the data on when we've concluded the research. The FDA, in an unprecedented way, said in this study that the contract research organization is not permitted to publish the results of that study without their approval. When one of the leading scientists contracted by NIDA contacted the FDA and said, why are you doing this? I can't participate either because it's unethical. The FDA responded back and said, because we're paying for it. The FDA suddenly has a pot of money we don't know about that isn't taxpayer money. They're not paying for it. The American people are paying for it, and yet they're saying that they're not going to release that data. Now, that's why the legal team has to get in and dig out and find those claims with the FOIA and then we're going after them hard. Because now they're violating the law when it comes to transparency and the ability to articulate why they're doing something, and they're claiming that they don't have this data already. They have it. We know they have it, and now we have to do it. Have to dig it out so that we can prove, and not just in a court of law, but prove to people in the U.S. Congress how far gone the FDA is when it comes to kratom and the way that they're handling this. They don't do this for other substances, right? Now, the other thing that we have just completed, and it's not yet available in full for full disclosure, is a safety study on kratom itself using what the FDA calls their oxycodone protocol. You will see a description of that survey study data, and here's the important part about that study data. The FDA has been briefed on it. They know the data which is powerful, which shows that kratom can be ingested by humans safely. They know it. In fact, when they were briefed on it, the scientists at the FDA were astonished at how good the data was. The public policy people, the politicians at the FDA, not so much. They didn't like it because it contests their premise, right? But a description of that study will be a part of the submission to the World Health Organization, but the FDA wants no parts of that being disclosed. And by the way, that same briefing was given to the National Institutes on Drug Abuse, and they were unanimously thrilled, because it validates all the research they're doing about the safety of kratom and the fact that it does not have a high addiction liability. In order to collect the comments and using the PR team to continue to market it, we currently have sites up in Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, and we're working on putting one up in Malaysia, and we're also putting a site up in Germany and the Netherlands. So the teams in their native languages, so creating these kind of websites and getting the PR push behind it. We've got an active PR campaign between now and the date of September 24th, when the WHO submission is done. We're going to be hammering in the public sphere what the FDA is trying to do, and informing countries around the world that the effort that's been undertaken by the WHO Expert Committee on Drug Dependence was premised on a flawed set of data, and we're going to make sure that they all know that. We also have a global stakeholder recruitment program where we're reaching out to these various stakeholders, not just scientists, but also public policymakers around the world. I've spoken with the Minister of Health in Thailand, whom I visited back in January 2020, when they started this quest to get rid of the laws on kratom. We're hopefully going to work with the Indonesian government to get some positive statement made about this isn't the right time to do this in terms of what you're doing. We need to see a lot more research being done. And we also have stakeholder partnerships, and that's where we're working with U.S.-based organizations, and there's a variety of them who are not necessarily allies of ours on the kratom fight, but are believers in plant-based medicines. They're believers that you don't criminalize people that are using otherwise safe substances just because the FDA doesn't like it. And they are groups that are committed to the freedom of the American people to be able to make informed decisions in ingesting safe consumer products that maintain their health and well-being. And so that's where we are in terms of what the thrust of what we're trying to do. At the bottom line, if I'm making a business decision, I can't execute on this business plan right now because we don't have the money in the bank in order to do it, and we've only got 3 weeks left, and that's why we are asking the kratom vendor community to do everything that you can in order to squeeze out, because ultimately it's going to mean the difference between whether you're in business, in the kratom business, or not. Because they'll ban it and without our intervention and strong push, and so we need your help there. And it's also important, I think, to recognize that if we're going to win this battle in the long term, that the pillar that the FDA is depending on now to continue their fight against kratom is to get the WHO to give a favorable recommendation to ban kratom. That's what they're living for, and so they're going to apply a lot of resources in order to get it done, and we can't afford not to fight this battle. We put out a fundraising appeal today to our advocacy community, and while we're fighting this battle, we're gearing up for 30 states around the United States in order to enact the Kratom Consumer Protection Act in 2022. And so we're having to hire those lobbyists and get it done. So this is a very difficult financial challenge for us to get it done, but it's something that we all obviously know we need to actually accomplish it. Because ultimately, here's the choice. We either retain the freedom to make these choices, for you to sell kratom, for consumers to purchase it, for people to use it on an informed basis responsibly, or it's banned. And that's really literally the bottom line. We've seen over the past 5 years that when we thought that this battle was over in 2016, and I can tell you, and I know you people, many of you heard me say this before, when I was hired, I told Susan Ash, who was then the president of the AKA, you can't win this battle. It's been published in the Federal Register. There's never been an instance where there's been a rescission or withdrawal of a scheduling ever. The best you can do is try to get some congressional support to build a case that they exceeded their regulatory authority, and maybe you have a court case. I told him that. Jack Henningfield, when he came in, and he just stepped in because he knew the FDA was wrong, he said, I'm willing to help, but there's no way you're going to overturn this ban. And his view was that it would only be for 2 years, because in that 2-year period, which is the term of a temporary ban that would be under the emergency powers section, they can't come back in. He said, and I'm just committed to find all the research to prove them wrong. Jack and I were wrong. We were wrong because the community rallied, because vendors told their customers when they showed up at their stores, you need to sign or comment on this. You need to sign the petition that went to the White House. 147,000 signatures were collected in a very short period of time, 23,000 actual comments. That's what made the difference. The people at the Drug Enforcement Administration, when we debriefed after this all happened, said we didn't know what kratom was. We were shocked at the outpouring. They had more than 6,000 people call them or email them between August the 31st and September the 22nd, I think it was, when they started the process, they're going to withdraw it. And when they saw that 51 members of Congress, 26 Republicans and 25 Democrats said don't do it, when they saw 13 members of the Senate, 2 separate letters, one talking about don't ban it on the policy, the other saying don't criminalize it. Senator Booker, Senator Gillibrand, and Senator Wyden said, don't criminalize this. That made a difference, right? So I was wrong, Jack Henningfield was wrong, the community was right, and now every time they tried to ban it, every time the FDA has peddled its nonsense to the states, we've won. Every time that we have gone to a battle with them toe-to-toe on the science before boards of pharmacy, we've won. We have 2 pending scheduling recommendations, I should say 2.5, 2 pending here in the United States today. One's in Nevada, where the legislature passed the Kratom Consumer Protection Act. And when I asked the staff, why are you entertaining a ban on a substance that's been approved by the legislature for sale with restrictions around how it's formulated and sold? And their answer was, because A, we can schedule anything we want, and the FDA says it's bad. And when you look at the transcript of the workshop that the Board of Pharmacy conducted on kratom, they had one FDA sycophant after another testifying. You had people that are well-intentioned, I suppose. You had the coroners coming in and saying, oh, we've had 14 to 16 deaths from kratom. Now, they didn't say, oh, by the way, it was just on the talk screen. They didn't say they didn't have anything to do with the death. They said, oh, we've had 14 to 16 deaths that were associated with kratom, and no qualification. That's the basis upon which the Board of Pharmacy in Nevada voted unanimously to open a scheduling procedure, and we're fighting that one tooth and nail. State of Alaska. Now, Alaska is a small state population-wise, big state in terms of territory. The subcommittee to the Board of Pharmacy recommended that kratom be added as a Schedule II substance, and that recommendation was ready to go to the governor when we found out about it. And they gave us an opportunity to make a presentation. We're working hard on it. I don't think that they're even going to submit the recommendation now that we've shown them the science, and they're revisiting it, but it's still pending. The other one that's the half is pending in Ohio. For those of you that are familiar with what happened in Ohio, we had more than 300 people that showed up to testify in the public hearing that they had. About 3:30 in the afternoon, after they'd heard about 90 of the witnesses and still had that rest of them that were lined up outside of the room, down the stairs, and outside the front door, they waved the white flag and said, okay, we are going to withdraw this, hold it in suspension, and we will let the legislature make this decision. And so I think in 2 weeks we'll have the second hearing in the House on the Ohio Kratom Consumer Protection Act. It's a little hybrid of what we normally do because the state agriculture department wanted to model it after their hemp bill, and so we made some modifications, but we're going to win that battle in the end. We're going to win battles even like in Oregon. And by the way, the Oregon legislature unanimously passed the Kratom Consumer Protection Act in the House. I think we had 2 votes against in the Senate, and the governor vetoed it. And do you know why she vetoed it? Because the FDA told the Department of Agriculture, if you're going to mess with us, if you're going to fight with us, then we're not going to deal with you effectively from then on. So the Department of Agriculture wanted out. And the governor said to us that if you send it to another agency that doesn't have to interact with the FDA, then I'll sign the bill next year. This is the kind of stuff that the FDA does. So we are going to continue to fight every place that the FDA wants to pick a fight with us. We need your help to be able to fight back effectively. We're winning. And we just need the continued support that you have. And don't let fatigue set in. Don't let overconfidence set in. Because when we're overconfident, that's when we lose, right? And that's the bottom line. So I'll conclude there, open up any questions that you might have about these topics or any others that I might be able to answer. I'll tell you if I can't. And then we can let you get back to the show. So any questions anybody has?
How can we help, Matt?
Okay, so pull out your credit card or your checkbook. Obviously, we need that help. The financial help is going to be important because all we can do is as much as the money lets us do, and we'll have to scale back on some of this if we don't hit the number. We've raised, I think, about half, a little more than half of the money we need, and we've got 3 weeks left, so we need everyone to double down with us and do that. We need every vendor to take the material that's available on the protectkratom.org and send it to your retail establishments and get them to put it up at their cash register and let their customers scan the QR code, and tell your vendors to tell them to do it and comment on the WHO issue. So that's important to do too. Disseminate that. If you're an online vendor, send it with your orders. Encourage people to do it. Alert them to it. I mean, you've got to ring the bell that we've got this problem and raise the flag that we've got to solve it, but we're going to need their help to do it. And so those are the kinds of things that you can do right now. We're here today. We're here today, first starting this fight on August 31st of 2016, the one that the FDA picked with us, and we're still here and we're still winning, but it's because of you, because of vendors that have been willing to put up the kind of money that's necessary. In Pittsburgh, where I grew up, they call it put your money where your mouth is. And you've done that, and we're appreciative of it, and we need to continue to work together in order to fight this battle. Now, obviously, we are a consumer organization, the AKA is, but we need the help of the vendors because you're the pipeline for safe consumer products in this industry. I would add two other things that the vendor community can do. One is be responsible in your marketing. Don't put out products that are obviously going to draw the attention of regulators because they looks like they appeal to children, or that they make impermissible either structure function claims, which puts you in the sphere of being a dietary supplement that's not been registered, or make a therapeutic claim, which puts you clearly in the illegal status under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, and will draw your attention, and we will report you. You cannot make a therapeutic claim, and it stretches a long way, by the way. You can't allow a customer who has experienced a very positive result offer a comment on your website or your blog or any other Facebook page or any other social media platform because you control it. And the FDA finds it, and they will penalize you for doing it, and they're ramping up. They can't win at the statutory level in terms of the Controlled Substances Act. They're going to shut you down with regulations, and you're seeing a ramp up of all that. The import alert is an extension of that. They're expanding their authority using a different version of the import alert than's on the books, and so we're going to have to fight them eventually in court on that battle too. But we need your help to make sure you market responsibly, because without that, we're going to look bad, and it paints a target on the entire industry. So thank you for that question.
What was that website you mentioned?
protectkratom.org. And there is on the protectkratom.org, and Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, there's the material that the vendors can use to send out to their retail establishments?
Correct. Yep.
So download it and send it, and offer incentives. Tell people that you'll watch their children if they comment or something, or you'll give them kratom or something. Whatever creative marketing thing you can do.
Yeah, can I just add to that? Can I share my story?
Yes, absolutely.
I just, really quickly, I just wanted to share my story.
This is David Carlucci, former state senator from New York, and formerly offered a ban bill in the New York State Senate, and then he became a convert. So
yes, well, that's the quick story I wanted to share, because Mac has done an excellent job sharing all this information with us. But I just wanted to hammer home that last point, that your comments, that it's going to be up to us, right? If it's going to be, it's up to me, it's up to all of you, that we have to not only be generous with the financial support, but even more importantly is take those stories that I know all of you have heard or have personally experienced and make sure that those stories about how kratom has changed your life, has turned it around, given your life back, that we have to share those stories. Because as a state senator, over 5 years ago, when the FDA was putting out all this stuff, I was co-chair of the Addiction Task Force in New York, and it did that for the last decade. And you hear the science, or alleged science, and you say, the FDA is saying this, so it's got to be true. And the silver lining for me was that I put in legislation that would ban kratom. And the fortunate part about that is that I heard from thousands of people that said, Senator, you can't do that. Don't do that, because I got my life back because of kratom. And it turned me around and made me an advocate for kratom. And that's what I think we need to do, because there are people out there. We believe there's about 15 million people that consume kratom in the United States. There are people out there that are using kratom, that it's changed their life, and they have no idea that this is going on. They have no idea how close we are to making kratom go underground and have it unaccessible in a safe way to consumers in the United States. And we know that will be devastating, not only for our industry and our businesses that you have worked so hard to build, but it'll be devastating to the millions of people in the United States that are depending on kratom to get their life back. We are in an epidemic right now, and I'm not talking about COVID, I'm talking about an overdose epidemic. And the reality is, as Mac has said, that logic and science often do not equal policy in the United States. That it takes all of us, and if they're not going to look at the science, we have to drill it home with the personal stories about how this has saved people. So that's why it's so important that if you can send those emails out to every one of your consumers, every one of your clients, to make sure they know what it's at stake, and they can do two simple things. They can make a contribution, of course, and more importantly, they can share their story and make sure it's one of those tens of thousands of comments that we're submitting, so that they know that there are a lot of people that have a strong message, a serious message, that this isn't just about business, this is about people's lives, it's about quality of life. So I just wanted to share that story quickly about myself. I was touched. It wasn't about just reading documents, it was about actual stories. I heard from people, interacting with them, but also the deluge of emails and letters I got. It really touched me and influenced my stance, and then I was able to influence others on that. So I'm just urging you, you have powerful stories, you have powerful experiences. Make sure we share them. So thank you. Thanks, Mac.
So there's only one thing that I'll say that he said wrong. Only one. He said that it's even more important to tell your story. I would say it's equally important. Okay? So for example, if you leave this meeting and you say, you know what, that was persuasive. I think that Senator Carlucci said it right, so I'm going to stroke a check for $5,000. I want you to stop. And I want you to say, no, I can make it 10. Because I'm telling you, it is not a contribution. It's an investment. It's an investment in the future of kratom to be available to the marketplace. So whatever you're thinking about, you got to double it or triple it, because that's what's going to make a difference. That's what makes this industry have the kind of SWAT through the American Kratom Association and through those thousands and thousands of people that tell that story. We can only get that story, get those people in front of those legislators with that kind of money. And here's one simple example. In Mississippi, which has been a horrible state for us, Senator Tate announced on a program, a TV program, that he was going to put in the bill to ban kratom again. And I talked him down from that cliff last year. He'd forgotten. And so I called him and he said, okay, I'm willing to talk to you, but you're going to need to spend a couple of hours with me. Now that means that I've got to go to Meridian, Mississippi. You can't get to Meridian, Mississippi easily, I found out. So it's going to take a flight. I got to drive a long way. But you know what? I'm going to go. I've started recruiting kratom consumers who are going to go with me from Mississippi. And we're going to meet with him, and we're going to spend a re-education program, 2 hours with him. And that's important because we're going to get him not to put that bill in to ban it. And he's already conceptually said, okay, I think I understand your point. If we can just regulate it. Oh, no. Of course, let's do that, right? That's what we do. It's that kind of thing replicated over and over again, and it really takes your support in order to get that done, okay?
What Indonesia do help you?
So what can Indonesia do to help us? So thank you. Hendricks is from Indonesia, leads one of the growers groups over there, and we're appreciative of the effort that he put into place to create standards in order to make sure we don't get contaminated kratom into the United States, because that's the FDA's target, right? So thank you for doing that. The Indonesian government needs to step up and apply for a relief from the import alert, because that's the only entity that has standing, and we're willing to help them with it. We need to continue to work with the Indonesian government to get them to do that. I spoke to the incoming Indonesian ambassador. He's interested. We need the BNN, the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Trade, to step forward and help us go to the FDA, because here's what the FDA does. They go to the Indonesian embassy every quarter, and they give them a list of the banned substances on their import alert list, and they tell Indonesia, we want you to help us stop the importation of kratom into the United States, these substances. Kratom's at the top of the list all the time. We need to then go back to the FDA and say, well, you say it's because it's contaminated, we'll fix it. Let's get it off the import alert, and that's the process that is supposed to be followed under the law for import alerts. So we need that help. Thank you. We need to help you. Obviously, responsible pricing to make sure farmers get paid. I know that's a big issue over there. We need to do our part too, but let's fix this import alert issue. With your help, we can do that. Billy.
So with the everything that just transpired in Thailand, do we have any contacts or anybody over there, like in the university or political status, or somebody that we can reach out to regarding, they decriminalizing? Why did they? I mean, I heard because it was meth, because kratom was helping with the meth epidemic that they're having over there.
There's great question.
Advantage on the international audience with the WHO.
If I appear tired, it's because I've been on these international calls. They were 12-hour time difference, 11 hours in Thailand, 12 hours in Malaysia. And so sometimes in the middle of the night, we're having these conversations. Dr. Sumyai, from Thailand, who heads one of the groups over there in Thailand that was an influential leader in getting the kratom ban lifted, is a solid supporter of ours. And we've been discussing with him and his team. He's recruiting other scientists right now. We reached out to Health Minister Newton and to the Justice Minister, and I forgot, it starts with an S, I forgot his name, to have them make official statements. So we're recruiting these people as quickly as we can. There's a huge movement there. And you're right, it's because they've determined that kratom isn't the evil plant, but in fact is helping people, particularly with the meth thing. Dr. Singh told me this morning, who's based in Malaysia, but they're doing studies in Thailand. He told me some interesting things, by the way, that we'll share off record, but offline. But he said that they found that the concoctions, that's where kratom is mixed with other things in Thailand, that about half of them are good things. They're mixing with the right things in order to fight this opioid epidemic. And it's the bad stuff that they need to ban. So it's a perfect parallel to what we're seeing in the United States with mixing kratom with fentanyl and heroin and morphine, which is a common adulterant. We need to fix that. So we're working hard. And Thailand's actually great for us right now. Malaysia's looking very good, particularly with Thailand having taken the lead. Indonesia we need to bring along to help us. We're talking with the EU people in the Netherlands and in Germany. I think we're going to get some help out of the EU as well. France shutting this down. They banned kratom in 2019, and they're not willing to talk more about it, even with new science. But we keep this battle going and the conversations going. So I think, I'll tell you more about the Thailand when we have more time.
Well, and then the other thing is, like on behalf of Choice Botanicals, we'd like to make a donation of $5,000, and I'm going to do $5,000 in match for a total contribution of $10,000.
It's music to my ears, Bill. It's music to my ears. All of you need to do that. I know it's tough. Thank you.
Thank you for the work that you guys do.
Thank you very much, and we appreciate all of you because we know you make a sacrifice, but I hope you look at it as an investment. I hope Billy looks at it as an investment because we're going to make this community, in the end, be stronger, and we're going to be able to send the science message to the policymakers in Washington, D.C. and in state capitals. So I'll tell you, we'll end there. Glad to stick around. I know you guys need to get down and make some money. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your support. Thank you for everything you've done for this community and for selling quality products to the community because that's important. So thanks very much.
Matt, do you take Bitcoin? Not yet.
Well, we need to find out how to do that. Let's start taking Bitcoin.
Best way to donate is just through the website. So I'm going to
Yep.
hit up all my distros and let them know.
Yeah, just check with Pete, and he can tell you, or Mark, they can tell you exactly how to do it. Yes,
Okay.
you can do it online. Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.